wishing everyone welcome. We are at the Alfred Nobel House Museum in Sweden, Karlskoga. This is the last home of Alfred Nobel, and a lot of artifacts and memories are still here in Karlskoga. We actually also today inaugurated the exhibition of cookbooks, drinks books, sustainability reports, and also general sustainability aspects in the spirit of Alfred Nobel. We will actually come into this quite naturally through the webinar today. I would like to introduce the president of Hallbars and Gourmand, Edouard Cointreau. Welcome. The floor or the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Pelle. I would say that this place where you are is very special. We have had a number of events there already. It's the third year we have exhibitions of books there. There's quite a few FAO books there. There's also really fantastic, interesting books from all around the world, from over 70 countries. I think that it should be visited by as many people as possible. The house itself is worth the visit, and it's still very much the way it was 1 century ago. I remember last time I was there, we had dinner, and I opened a closet and I found actually the wine list of Alfred Nobel. And I could tell he had the wine list that was worth it, with really wonderful champagne and Chateau Cheval Blanc and many other really good bottles of Bordeaux. He really liked French wines. So congratulations, Pelle, for receiving us and hosting us there. Today is a very important day. What we do at Alfred Nobel is has been the Hallbars Awards for sustainability, which and some Gourmand Awards. We think that Alfred Nobel could not be in the environment and sustainability because there were not topics at the time, but his mind would have understood what we do. And actually the governor Larsen from Örebro said so, that if he had been alive today, he would do awards, he would do the Nobel Prizes for sustainability. I mean, he understood what we're doing. So gastronomy and sustainability are very, very important today, especially after the pandemic. The pandemic has changed everything for gastronomy. It has awakened many people to the need for sustainability. Gastronomy is under very strong pressures from everywhere, and we have to find new ways of doing things, which is what FAO and their good work with food systems is being done. There's much more needs to be done. Many people need to be listened to. There are solutions. I'm rather optimistic actually now, more than I was a year ago. And so I'm very pleased we have this meeting. The next point on the agenda will be a video about what we did just 10 days ago in Umeå, Sweden, which was a big meeting for sustainability and gastronomy. And we gathered people from over 60 countries, hundreds of people from many interesting walks of life. Some were chefs. We had many academics. We had normal authors. People from the street also wanted to participate once they saw how it was going. We promoted local products. We were very much into local and regional products there, thanks to your husband's board thing. Mm-hmm. So really now I think we should get right into the meat of our meeting and show the videos that we have prepared for this webinar. So the first
is actually the premiere showing today, world premiere. I will start screen sharing from my computer here, and it's always a challenge to make the technology work, but I think we are there. Absolutely. I think you can see my screen now.
Yeah. Okay.
And then let me know if you can't hear the sound.
We lost the sound.
Yes.
Welcome to Homeo, welcome to Sweden. My name is Cyril Prévost, and this is the place to be for food, cookbooks, wine books. Follow me.
Welcome to the Gourmand Awards.
The Gourmand Award, it's all about food, wine books, cookbooks.
Food.
Yep, more. Chapeau.
Kladdreibrot, livet oss. Gourmand Award. Gourmand Award.
Welcome to Folkets Hus. This is Katarina, and I'm happy to say welcome to Gourmand Awards here in Umeå.
Welcome. I'm Edouard, the president of the Gourmand World Cookbook Awards, which actually are all about food culture and today sustainability. We have conferences. It's actually a Umeå Food Symposium, the first one. We hope it becomes annual, joining academics, researchers, and normal authors and specific chefs and so on from the worldwide.
What is this category here? 25 years.
25 years is, we started the awards in 1995 at Frankfurt Book Fair. Because of the pandemic, we couldn't celebrate the 25 years of the Gourmand Awards like we wanted. We did an event in Paris, and now we're doing an international event in Umeå in Sweden to celebrate the 25 years.
Very lucky to receive the Gourmand Award.
Is it water or vodka?
My book.
We managed to get the first sustainability awards. We actually have been giving awards for sustainability since 2011. It's also focusing on the climate and sustainability. We managed to get into a special relationship with the Alfred Nobel residence and house and museum, which are very important to me. We have been giving peace awards since 2004 in Barcelona. Without food, there's no peace. And really, food is at the bottom of all the wars. And winning the peace is the key. It's not winning the war. We want to develop a lot of food tourism here. It's a really interesting gastronomy city. We want to do a very big event centered on food.
Let's meet Hanna Offelson.
Good morning everyone och hjärtligt välkomna till Umeå.
She's the head of the city marketing, and we go for a gourmet tour. What are we doing here?
Oh, we're going for a gourmand tour.
What kind of cheese is it, and is it a local cheese?
This is a local cheese.
Yeah.
It's from Umeå. It's just 70 kilometers from here. One of the most famous cheese from Sweden.
Currently, we are in the Costa's coffee. Mm-hmm. Why coffee is important in Sweden?
Oh, we wouldn't live without it.
Yesterday, there was sun and there was rain, beauty in the mundane.
Okay, skål.
As the light startled our eyes, we let go of disguise. And now, there's something in the air.
I am so glad that we in Umeå are able to become a member of this wonderful family. Welcome to Sápmi. That is the Sami word for the Sami country, stretching from Norway to Sweden, to Finland, and to Russia.
We give awards to Sami books since 2015. They actually came to China to our event. They have beautiful songs. They're very important people. For us, the Sami folk is very important. And we even have the FAO leaders of the Indigenous people unit who are coming from Rome to give the keynote speech of our Indigenous people segment.
Everything you eat in the morning, everything you eat in the afternoon, in the evening, is actually the result of hundreds of years of observation of nature. And the best people at doing this all over the world are indigenous peoples.
In 2015, FAO invited a caucus of indigenous leaders, and they asked us to work on indigenous people's food systems. And so this is where we started to work with different organizations to develop a methodology of field activities.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming.
And thank you so much, Edouard, for this opportunity.
Thank you. I'll be very happy to take this next invitation.
Et surtout, merci au travail accompli.
Thank you very much. Wow, this is big.
I never could drink a drop of any drink, alcoholic drink. You are responsible for that.
I'm happy.
We have a very special spirit at the Gourmand Awards. We actually are inspired by the Olympic spirit. We call it the Gourmand family spirit. It's not my invention. It's the people who come, who invented this, and they really come to meet and they make friends, lifelong friends here. It's a very special spirit, just like the Olympic Village. When we have an event, we create our own civilization, our own culture. And we are very, very pleased to be here because we find that the people in Umeå are responding to this extremely well.
There we go. Thank you, Edouard. This was a fantastic video.
Thank you.
And all the credit, of course, to the filming and the editing as well. They've been working very, very fast. I think I've heard a figure like they had a total of 24 full hours of recorded material.
Yeah.
Edited down to 7+ something minutes. I'm actually moving on now to a speech delivered by Professor Mai-Lis Hellenius of Karolinska Institutet. And I'm going to mess around a little bit with my computer, if you bear with me. Okay, there we are. I will start screen sharing that immediately. She sends her regards. She is a bit busy today, so she recorded this for us as late as yesterday. And then in a few seconds, we will hear sound. Can you please give me a thumbs up if you can hear her sound?
Thank you for the kind invitation. My name is Mai-Lis Hellenius, and I am a professor at the Karolinska Institutet. My research area is prevention of cardiovascular disease, focusing on nutrition and physical activity, a healthy lifestyle. We are facing major health challenges. The health gaps and costs of healthcare are increasing. Non-communicable diseases stands for some 80% of the global burden of disease. We know today that approximately 80% of all cardiovascular diseases like myocardial infarction and stroke, 30% of all cancers, 40% of cognitive disorders, dementia and Alzheimer can be prevented with a healthier lifestyle. But major preventive measures are required, and they have to be evidence-based. A couple of years ago, the diet collaborators from the Global Burden of Disease concluded from studying the health effects of dietary risks in 195 countries that improvement in diet could prevent 1 in every 5 deaths globally, and especially so from cardiovascular disease and cancer. Just a few months ago, another group of researchers concluded that there are many years of life to win. If we change from a Western diet to a very healthy, the optimal diet, from the age of 20, we could win some 11, 13 years. From the age of 60, 8 to 9 years. And from the age of 80, still we can gain some 3 or 4 years when it comes to life expectancy. That's the power of a healthy diet. What is a healthy diet then? Well, this food pyramid illustrates what research tells us about best food for health for us humans. We are omnivores and we need to eat a variety of food to get all the essential components we need. And you see, the basis is green or colorful, vegetables, fruit, berries, lentils, nuts, and the fat should preferably be vegetable, fibers, vitamins, antioxidants. And we should add something from the sea, fish, shellfish, or mussels, for example. And then we can add smaller amounts of chicken, cheese, yogurt, and very small amounts of processed meat, red meat, salt, and sugar. How do we know? Well, many observational studies. For example, this meta-analysis of 113 prospective studies, meaning that they measure what people eat and then follow them for many years ahead. And in this meta-analysis, there are 3.2 million participants. And it's clear that a healthy dietary pattern, as the pyramid illustrates, is associated with a decreased risk of cardiovascular disease, common cancer, type 2 diabetes, neurodegenerative diseases like dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and also it affects life expectancy. Today, there are also studies in men and women being treated for a cancer, showing that a healthy lifestyle is associated with a better prognosis. However, observational studies are not enough to prove causality. We also need intervention studies. And this is one of the most important ones.
Can you hear her voice now?
Over 7,000 Spanish men and women, 55 to 80 years old. Half of them already had type 2 diabetes, and all of them had risk factors for cardiovascular disease, overweight, abdominal obesity, high blood pressure, high blood lipids, and so on. And they were randomized to 3 groups. One group receiving repeated advice on a healthy diet, and they were also given for free extra virgin olive oil, 1 liter per week, and they asked them to take an additional at least 3 spoons per day. Group number 2 received the same kind of dietary advice, but they were also provided with free walnuts, hazelnuts, and almonds. And they asked them to take an extra handful a day, approximately 30 grams per day. The control group did not receive this kind of dietary advice, and no olive oil and no nuts. The study was in fact stopped after 4.8 years for ethical reasons. And the ethical reasons were that in these both intervention groups, every 3rd myocardial infarction and stroke was prevented. And then it's not fair to go on and leave the control group without this effective intervention. The PREDIMED study from Spain is important, and they have already published over 300 scientific papers. And they noted that type 2 diabetes was effectively prevented. The risk of breast cancer was reduced in women. Depression was prevented, and also they noted an effect on cognitive impairment and dementia. This food pyramid stands on a basis of physical activity. we are omnivores, and we need to eat quite a lot and a variety of different kinds of food. And to be able to do so without gaining too much weight, we need to be physically active on a daily basis. And today we are very worried about the fact that children, adults, and the elderly spend 9 to 10 hours a day sitting. Physical inactivity has decreased. Just one example, and this is a study from 12 countries: Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, Colombia, Finland, India, Kenya, Portugal, South Africa, UK, and the United States. Some 6,000 children, they are living in urban areas, I should say. They have measured physical activity pattern with an accelerometer, and it's a quite objective measurement during 1 week. And look at the results. There are no great differences between boys and girls, and no great differences between the different countries. Children of today spend 9 hours a day sitting. We are really living in a pandemic of physical inactivity, and that pandemic started decades before the COVID pandemic. This was just a short reminder about the fact that the knowledge about lifestyle and health, the scientific evidence, has increased substantially and rapidly. And that gives us a better and better basis when we update different kinds of guidelines for a healthy diet or for physical activity. And also, I forgot to say that the same food pyramid is also the best food for planet health. Well, but the last step to implement the knowledge is, of course, the most important step. These are well-known 7 goals for sustainable development. And this reminds us and me that spreading the knowledge and implementing the knowledge about healthy eating habits is, of course, not enough to promote health in the world. Not everyone has the opportunity to choose healthy food. We must remember that poverty, hunger, famine, conflicts, and wars have a huge effect on human health and well-being, as well as longevity. I am very much looking forward to hearing Professor and Director of Swedish Institute of Global Health Transformation, Peter Friberg's lecture. I end there, and my message is that there are so much health and well-being left to gain. Eating habits and physical activity play an important role, but we must not separate health, sustainability, and peace. And we really need to work together in the future. Thank you so much to Pelle, Agorelius, and Edouard Cointreau for providing an international network and this basis for an important and interesting webinar. Thank you so much for the kind invitation, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mai-Lis, Hellenius. We will move to the other parts of the webinar quite soon, but I'd like to mention for all the attendees that you can please send in questions to the panel via the chat, and then we will pick up on those questions while we're talking about the different lectures at the end of the webinar. It is most interesting to see that there are more and more evidence to show that the importance for a healthy lifestyle is really like a key factor, not only for human health, but also for the planetary health. I think we will come back to that in the different sections that we're coming to. I'm now going to move to next step here is the contribution from Robert Oliver of the Pacific Island Food Revolution. And I'll start screen sharing in a bit. Or did actually the screen sharing work? No, it didn't. Hang on 1 second. Now the screen sharing works. Please give me thumbs up when you can start hearing
Hi,
Robert.
this is Robert Oliver from Pacific Island Food Revolution. Thanks so much for inviting me here today. I'm going to give you a little background
You can hear
on
him?
Pacific Island Food Revolution.
Thank you.
Fiji, Samoa, Vanuatu, the Kingdom of Tonga. You think of these places and you think of swaying palms, beautiful water, beautiful beaches, beautiful people. And all of this is true, but there is trouble. There is big trouble in paradise. The Pacific is in the throes of an NCD crisis, a non-communicable disease crisis. Diabetes, heart disease, obesity are all ravaging the region. 84% of NCD-related deaths in Fiji, the worst in the world. There are 3 amputations a day in Fiji due to diabetic concerns, and 75% of all Pacific deaths are related to non-communicable diseases. Now, this is all quite new. So over the course of a generation, there's been a change in the way Pacific people eat. It's kind of the long tail of globalization and colonization playing out in the food landscape, as there's been a switch from the traditional local foods that I was brought up on in Fiji and the markets to processed foods. And we've all been exposed to the tsunami of marketing that comes with processed foods and sugary drinks. But of course, the key to good health is still sitting right there in the markets, in the farms, in the Pacific backyard. The key to good health sits in local cuisine. So how do we take local food, local cuisine, and make it fresh and sexy for a new generation? Now, I've worked on a lot of the big cooking shows. I was a judge on My Kitchen Rules, and I'd always viewed these big reality shows as kind of trashy, but then I was like, wow, they really get people cooking. They really get people talking about food. They engage a new generation in food. So I put together a project called Pacific Island Food Revolution to do just that, to raise this, to create this excitement around Pacific Island cuisine in Fiji, Samoa, Vanuatu, the Kingdom of Tonga. I really wanted to make something that people wanted to be a part of. And so I reached out to a group of friends in the countries to host the show with me, and here are some thoughts from them.
My name is Bertrand Jang, and I am the new host for Pacific Island Food Revolution for Fiji. Now, we all know that our original Pacific cuisine is delicious and nutritious. So Pacific Island Food Revolution is about the restoration of Pacific cuisine, suited for these modern times.
Malo and Lele, I am Fololani Kerr, the co-host for the Kingdom of Tonga. We in the Pacific love visual mediums, so TV is the perfect way to get into people's homes and lives with this positive cultural message. Plus, I get to look pretty, dress up, and smile for the camera.
Hello everyone. My name is Fatausi Mackenzie Reo, co-host for the beautiful islands of Vanuatu. Pacific Island Food Revolution is a solution to a Pacific problem. We do not need anything from outside to fix this. We have the traditional knowledge and our food behind us to guide us. You see, non-communicable diseases is not just government business. Through food, non-communicable diseases is everyone's business. And you know what? We can do this.
Talapalava, this is Dora Rossi, the co-host for beautiful Samoa. Hey, everybody everywhere is talking about Pacific Island Food Revolution and about food. Pacific Island Food Revolution is something people want to be a part of because, you see, it is not just a TV show. It's a social movement. It really is a revolution.
You can see I'm not short on personality for the show. So 2 years in, thanks to the support of the Australian and New Zealand governments, we have 5 million Pacific viewers a week, going into 5 million Pacific homes a week, 20 networks in every country. We play internationally on TV1 in New Zealand, on Maori TV in New Zealand, ABC International, on SBS Food in Australia, primetime, Saturday night, all through Southeast Asia, in the United Kingdom, and soon in the United States. And this is important because people are often learning about Pacific cuisine, Pacific food for the first time. And while there's a lull in tourism, I'm hoping they'll come back to the region wanting our food, knowing about our food, and this is a vital link to local agriculture. Local cuisine requires local agriculture. We've got a massive social media infrastructure, lots and lots of activity on Facebook and Instagram. You can look them both up, Pacific Island Food Revolution. We've also got 4 radio shows and a radio show in each of the country in their local language. And we have a website with all the recipes, so you can actually take this food into your life, into your home. And this is where the buzz really sits. It's around all the social media. People get to engage with us beyond the television. There's been a couple of spin-offs come about. One is Pacific Kids Food Revolution, which is a YouTube series working with children in Fiji. It's just taken off, and that is in partnership with Pacific Island Food Revolution and UNICEF, and we love working with UNICEF. This is Sanma Food Revolution, a terrific spin-off in Vanuatu. 2 of our contestants from season 2 of the television series, who are by now, of course, terribly famous locally, were approached by their communities to bring the revolution into the community. So they do a roadshow, which is in Santo Island in Vanuatu, Sanma Food Revolution, in collaboration with the Asia Foundation, and we love collaborating with the Asia Foundation. We did an a thorough impact assessment survey at the end of season 2 of Pacific Island Food Revolution. And what we found were incredible numbers of people who had been exposed to us, as opposed to people who had not been watching the show, the difference in their eating habits. And this is that.
The report found an improvement in better eating habits in Fiji by 33%. Also, Vithi.
In Vanuatu, we experienced 38% of improvement in the way that the people eat. This is after watching Pacific Island Food Revolution. This is real impact. Vanuatu, go, 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 itaftumas.
Oh, the Telsey. You better move over, honey, because in Samoa, we clocked in a staggering 146% improvement in the way we eat.
Woo! Oh, move over, all of you. That's nothing. In Tonga, we found 262% improvement in the way people eat. Say what? In other words, people who watches us nearly 3 times likely to choose local, healthy food. But then again, we all know that Tonga is the best.
Just a wee bit competitive, huh? So what do these numbers mean? We found that in the Pacific, in Tonga, 87% of Tongans were watching the show, 83% of people in Vanuatu, 68% of people in Fiji, 49% of people in Vanuatu watching the show. 42% of them have reported a positive change in their diets over the past year. If that plays out over 5 years, 10%, just 10% of that number, if they maintain this behavior, 170,000 people will move towards better health in our 4 countries. That's in the 4 countries alone. Imagine this across the whole Pacific. And it's also important to remember that food is not just a development, a health and well-being issue. It's fundamental to Pacific identity, to all cultural identity. It goes right to the heart. It's what our mothers make us. So this is about the elevation of culture. And Dr. Johnne in season 2, noticing some of the contestants were very caught up in the competition, he wanted to remind them of what they were actually doing.
This is before we are going to do the final announcement. If I could just share a few words with you before we move on. I teamed up with Robert several years ago because of the crisis that we are facing at the Ministry of Health. I felt that we are at the bottom of a cliff and we are at the receiving end of a lot of these unhealthy habits. We did a small study and we found out that we were amputating 1 in every 12 hours, diabetics. And that was diabetes alone. We're talking about cancer and heart attacks and all the NCDs that are. We know we are competing against, processed foods and good marketing and a lot of money poured into them. One thing I shared with Robert was, if I go into the village today, an old lady serves me fresh fish, roro and tapioca, they will apologize to me for serving me that food. And he didn't believe me. I said, well, we can go today to any village in Fiji. That was the positioning of our food, the way I saw it, and I didn't like it. And I told him we have to change that. We shouldn't be looking down at our food. That's why I'm part of this revolution. I'm emotional about it, and I'm happy that I'm emotional about it. Because I know I'm representing a lot of people who are actually facing more hardship and struggles because of that. And your participation means the world. You standing up and coming to this show. It's a competition, yes, it is. But it's much more than that. We are trying to elevate ourselves, our culture, what we are good at. Superfoods. This changes a lot. The platform of health for our country. And I do not know what's going to happen next after this and go to the finals. But I want you to know that your participation is going to inspire a lot of people in Fiji, in the Pacific, those of us who are overseas. And I want you to know that. Don't take it lightly. And if you come out of here and you don't make it to the finals, know that you have contributed immensely to the health of this nation just by taking part. I wanted to share that with you because I feel it's the voice of those people that are lying in our hospitals, struggling with lack of resources. And you know very well the struggles because you come from that, you represent that. And irrespective of what happens today, I hope that you will take that with you. Thank you.
So it's important to remember what is cuisine. Cuisine is the cultural system of food. And all of the Pacific Island Food Revolution work is based on our Pacific food culture, the asset the Pacific food culture represents. And we're very grateful to the Gourmand family for recognizing our books and their award system. And that is really the basis of where we began our work. And local food is not just health and well-being, it's also identity. It's the relationship with climate change, with biodiversity, the tourism experience, with immunity, with culture and heritage, with more and more and more. And it's also really critical to remember what is a revolution. A revolution is something by the people, about the people, and for the people. And who are those people? This is our revolution.
It's our revolution.
This is our revolution.
It's our revolution.
This is our revolution. This is our revolution.
It's our revolution.
This is our revolution.
This is our
This
revolution.
is our revolution.
We're all in this together, and we can get through this together. The revolution begins at home.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Robert. That was most inspiring. We will pick up on what Robert said and in his participant speeches a bit later, but actually I want to move on to the next speaker now, giving the floor to Anna Brunel. Welcome, Anna. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Pelle. Very nice to see you again, Edouard, as well. Very nice to meet you, Peter, and thank you for all the attendees to be here today. So I will present, I will actually, if you allow me, have a presentation on Indigenous people's food systems, a little bit different than what we did for the UMEA's Food Symposium, so that we can broaden a little bit the discussion. So, so why Indigenous people's food systems? So I don't put in full screen because usually my computer crashes when I do it, but if it's okay for you, I can keep it this way, and you tell me if you cannot. Okay, perfect. So why Indigenous people's food system for the sustainable development goals? So first of all, in 2018, the FAO Director General recalled that without Indigenous peoples, we cannot achieve the zero hunger goal, and we will not achieve the sustainable development. So this is what our colleague Mai-Lis also recalled. The sustainable development goals are very important. We have still 10 years to succeed it. And so at FAO, we have several publications related to Indigenous people's food systems. One that you know well, that is called Indigenous people's food systems, Insight on Sustainability and Resilience from the Frontline of Climate Change. And thank you very much again to the Gourmand Awards and the Hallbars organization to give Hall of Fame awards this year and last year. Thank you very much. And also the white paper paper on Indigenous people's food systems. So this white paper is a collective effort of about 60 contributions that aims to characterize what is the Indigenous people food systems and why they are important to preserve and to strengthen. The white paper is actually a result of the Global Hub on Indigenous People Food System. So as I was mentioning to you, we have 90 members in the Global Hub, including APP as an indigenous organization from Asia. We also have a FILAC. We also have the Sami Parliament in Norway, Finland, and Sweden. And also in terms of universities and research centers, we have University of Cambridge, we have C4, the World Agroforestry Center, IRD, etc. We have also UN agencies in this global hub. So really the role of this global hub is to generate knowledge based on oral knowledge of Indigenous peoples and scientific and technical knowledge from science. And the idea is really to keep knowledge at the same level of validity and respect so that we can really advocate for Indigenous people's food systems. So now, why FAO works on Indigenous people's food systems? At political level, there is a UN Decade of Action to deliver the Sustainable Development Goal. As I was saying, it will end in 2030. We have also the UN Decade of Action on Nutrition that will end up in 3 years. That calls for the enhancement of sustainable food system and a healthy diet. We had in 2021 the UN Food System Summit, and also FAO is mandated to define sustainable food systems. And as we know, FAO is a technical agency and it gives some norms. And so what the definition of FAO will be, the definition that FAO will serve as a reference for policy making internationally. So that's why it's very important to frame it well. And also, as we were saying in the video, in 2015, Indigenous representative officially requested FAO to work on Indigenous people's food system. So that is why at political level, we work on the food system of Indigenous peoples. At technical level, it's very beautiful to see that Indigenous people food system preserve biodiversity. They also provide diverse and nutritious diets that are sustainable, and they're also climate resilient. So this is basically, they provide many answers of the challenge of today. We also consider that their traditional is complementary to the scientific knowledge, and it's important to learn more about Indigenous people's food systems. And also at FAO as a technical agency, we need to develop new metrics, new perspective, new way to implement our work and to achieve the zero hunger goal. So if we look at Indigenous people's food systems, they are very relevant in terms of sustainability and sustainability. Why? Because they are some of the eldest in the world, existing in the world. So we put an example of the food system of Aboriginal people in Australia. They have been hunter-gatherers in thousands of years. And it's very long related to agriculture in relation to 1 hour. Agriculture represents 10 minutes of existence. And now all of our global food system is based on the post-green revolution, and it's only a few milliseconds of existence in relation to 1 hour. So we see that the disruption of the sustainability of the food system globally that we see now is very recent and has causing lots of damages. Now, if we look at Indigenous people's food systems, what we see is that they have a circular conception of, they work in circularity. So all food system in Western society or dominant societies is linear food system. So we have production, we have processing, we have transformation, we have distribution, etc. In Indigenous people's food system, everything is inside of the territory, and it is also circular. So, and everything is interrelated. So the natural element, is interrelated with the social, cultural elements, and embedded in cosmogony, in biocentrism, in traditional knowledge, and in Indigenous language. So that's a very specific aspects of the food system. As I was saying, so in terms of cosmogony, for Indigenous peoples, food has spiritual and cosmogonic connotation. Indigenous people understand that people are not separate from nature. Harmonious living means like living in balance with nature. They have also very specific territorial management. So for example, Indigenous people, their food system generate food. They do not produce food. Why do we say they generate food? Because they really rely on the natural capacity of the ecosystem to generate food. That's why they are hunter-gatherers, that's why they are fishers. Sometimes when they are cultivators, when they practice shifting cultivation, they have a huge biodiversity in their food system, but they still rely on the concept of food generation, letting the ecosystem produce what is available. They're also very much, many Indigenous peoples are actually pastoralists and nomadic people, and we know very well in Sweden, the Sami people are reindeer herders. Indigenous peoples work with nature, not against nature, and they also consider future generation. The traditional knowledge is really the backbone of the food system, and it is embedded in the Indigenous language. Again, their governance is very, they have their own governance system, and so land is considered as a common resource, and it's a community-based governance system. They have social institutions and customary laws that are very local and people-specific. And Indigenous women and youth play a critical role. For example, Indigenous women have lots of knowledge on seeds and on wild edible gathering. They also have a value system of balance and reciprocity, and that is why it makes the sustainability of the food system, because they really honor and they respect Mother Earth, and they will not take more than what the ecosystem allow. And also within the community, in terms, for example, in situation on food insecurity, they don't hesitate to share food so that the community remains safe and food secure. For example, so this is an example of the Baka people from the book on Indigenous Peoples Food System that I presented. And this is an example of food generation conception. So for the Baka people in Cameroon, plantain is made when returning from the forest, showing how the Baka apprehend agriculture in a similar sense to gathering. So this is low management agriculture with weeding in low frequency and low intensity that allow the growth of numerous spontaneous wild edible plants. So we have yams, we have mushrooms, we have African ginger, etc. So this is very particular to the society. And so, as I was saying, indigenous peoples' governance system preserve biodiversity. So they occupy the 476 million indigenous persons in the world, occupy over a quarter of the world's land, and they conserve 80% of the global biodiversity. And there is evidence that land and forests managed and governed by indigenous peoples are able to resist forest loss and experience lower rates of land conversion than forests in protected areas and other forests. This is a very interesting map, and sorry, I will go a little bit faster. I think I'm already at the end of my 10 minutes. So this is where we can see an overlap between protected areas and high level of biodiversity in indigenous peoples' land. And so we see in this map the overlap of indigenous peoples' territory, biodiversity conservation, showing how they are able to preserve biodiversity. Indigenous peoples' food system also provides nourishment and healthy diets. So it is first essential for food security, nutrition, cultural identity, and of course, peace and sustainability, as we heard with my colleagues. And it's very interesting to see that they're making use of several hundreds of species of edible and nutritious species that include crops, wild edibles, and animal wildlife. We can cover close to 100% of adult territory energy needs. So for example, the Ticona Cocama Yagua people in Puerto Nariño in Colombia source 80% of their proteins from wild fishing activities. So this leads me to another point that is very important to consider, is that the level of self-sufficiency is very high. For example, the Baka people that we saw, they source 80% of their food from the forest and from the activities on their territories. And so in the research that we did to profile 8 indigenous people's food systems, we thought that the maximum of, or the minimum of self-sufficiency is still 55%. So that's why preserving the territory of indigenous peoples is essential to preserve the food system. Preserving the traditional knowledge, the cultures, and the language of indigenous peoples is essential to preserve the food system. So maybe I will go very fast on this one. Sorry. That food is also medicine. Indigenous peoples also know a recipe that allows them to increase the bioavailability of the nutrients. There is lots of richness. And they can also broaden the world food base. For example, stevia, chia, quinoa, all of this food that we know now well in non-indigenous territories are actually from indigenous people. And so they can expand the food base in the world, of course, in respect of the free, prior, and informed consent and their intellectual property rights. This is a prerequisite. In addition, their food system is climate resilient. Why? Because this is based on their traditional knowledge. They have also huge diversity of food. So when one is not available, another one can be available, and this all year round. So they're able to store the food, and they're also able to source their food from different sources all year round. And again, as I was saying, food sharing and seed sharing is an important aspect of the food system. This is a slide I really like because it shows how indigenous people's language is overlapping biodiversity and indigenous territories. So over the 7,000 spoken language in the world, 5,417 are indigenous language. So nearly half of the language on Earth are found in 35 biodiversity hotspots. So it really show the clear overlap between indigenous territories and biodiversity conservation. And this is also something that we saw in the book that for the Kashi food system in India, there are many terms that are unknown by the Hellenius classification that are known by the Kashi people. And also we don't have an English name attributed to many of them. I'm going to the end. So really, that's my key messages. The world is not on track to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 2 on zero hunger. Indigenous peoples, their food system, knowledge, and practice have been and continue to be marginalized in policy making. And so they experience dismantling of the food system, and many of them are many of the undernourished people across the world are indigenous peoples. So as I was saying, they rely on their own food system for their food security, and they have a high level of self-sufficiency as a food system. This, I said it already. And so they are the different drivers that affect indigenous peoples across the world. So lack of respect of principle and right to self-determination. Lack of respect of free prior and informed consent, for example, in particular with conservation policy, or forced displacement and land grabbing, or limited mobility, flexibility. So there is a series of drivers that affect the food system. Also, of course, global climate change, loss of genetic and food-based diversity. And that's why we need to work with indigenous peoples to support them in their fight to preserve their food systems. So what is needed now to achieve the SDGs? We need to recognize indigenous people's food systems as game changer. We need to respect their traditional governance system, their territorial management practices, their collective rights, and we need to fully allow them to participate in policy making and practice. And we need to co-create knowledge with them because they have a deep understanding and respect for nature. And they can also expand the food base. And they also have knowledge on local variety and food and medicine. So we have a lot actually to learn from indigenous peoples for ourselves, and also lots of humility if we want to support them in their quest. And of course, interculturality and education in food policy. So we need to adapt our food policy to the culture and the cosmogony of indigenous peoples, of course, in including them in the debates. So thank you very much. I hope I wasn't too long. Here are the different publications we have, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Anna. You said a lot in a short moment of time. There is always the key question of respecting one another, regardless of them being a part of a numerous, large or a minority group. And this brings to a common factor of respect. And I would like to move on quite quickly now to Professor Peter Friberg and let him screen share and introduce himself. And then there is time at the end of the webinar to actually also discuss and talk about these different aspects. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Pelle, and for allowing me to speak here at this great meeting, and I'm very thankful for that. Just arranging my phones. So my task here today is to present some ideas around peace, conflict, and relations to health and gender. I would just like to start with putting the importance from the WHO this year, from just a couple of weeks back, where Dr. Tedros really put the peace initiative on the highest agenda. So that means that WHO Global Health and Peace Initiative was disseminated all over the world. That means to address conflict and strengthen the resilience of violence and empower people to build and rebuild relations with each other. So that impacts so many countries across the world, because it has major impact on societies and the interlinkages with the people, the individuals, and society. And we need to advance this development with the peace nexus. And we know that particularly now, given the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But there are also many other conflicts with consequences. And many of the already vulnerable populations and suffering people, for example, the nutrition, they will be exacerbated with this ongoing crisis. The commission that I will just turn to has its start early on. It was actually in the beginning of the 00 century, where the University of McMaster and the Lancet, the British journal, had health and peace conferences. And that work was actually based on the WHO's framework on health as a bridge for peace. So how much does actually health contribute to have a peaceful society? And that goes further than back in 1981 resolution in the World Health Assembly, where they highlighted the role of the health sector that can play in preserving and promoting peace as a significant factor for the attainment of health for all. So that was the initial statements. And that in turn was based on initiative from Central America, and 5 presidents of the Central American countries came together and thought, we cannot accept that young kids are not vaccinated because of the guerrilla attacks and the civil wars within countries, which was very, very prevalent in the 80s. So they went to the Pan American WHO hub and met all of these together to say that, can we do something about this? And what happened in consequence for that was that there was, for a couple of days, the war was stopped and the health staff could actually go out and vaccinate the kids. So that was the basis of this resolution. However, though, when time goes by, the WHO wanted to do more about this. And it was realized, though, that where is the evidence really for trying to scale up this kind of exercises? So that was some start for our commission, which I will just soon turn to. But we need also to have evidence to really support what WHO is actually doing and saying. So this Lancet site commission was on peace for societies through health, but also extremely important in this aspect is the gender equality. So that was started in formally in 2019, but the initiative actually came from the Lancet chief editor Richard Horton in 2017. But what is a Lancet Commission? Just briefly mention, many people perhaps don't know what the Lancet Commission actually is. It is a collaboration between the academic researchers from universities, for example, from around the world, and governed also by the editors of the Lancet Journal. They don't they guide you in the sense of getting it in a good layout way and so on, and what kind of should be there for the Lancet readers. They don't govern the ideas and hypotheses and so on. And it's tried to be then, they should show really academic excellence with evidence here. but also to this, to have some activist spirit on this. And it goes to the most pressing issues in science. What can we actually try to achieve in medicine and the global health area? And it is there for changing policies to have some impact in society. And most importantly, this transformative research concerned with equity and social justice, that is the basis of it. But it is also to work interdisciplinary, to connect researchers from different disciplines all over the world. So it's equity and gender with the geographical concerns as well. And that has been going on for about 10 or 15 years. And many of these are landmark papers, really. So what the invitation from the Lancet to us was to trying to see what kind of evidence do we actually have that health promotes peaceful society, and what evidence is there for gender equality to promote healthy societies. So we gathered 25 commissioners from the different disciplines all over the world, with many collaborating centers and with partners, and particularly important will be the WHO, and also particularly important here with the Mediterranean office, with 22 countries within the WHO Eastern Mediterranean office. However, though, 11 of them are in ongoing conflict and have severe problems. So we work closely with them, and with the support from also Finland and Sweden in this. And we have the, as chair of our commission, the former president of Finland, Tarja Halonen, which is a fantastic person to be involved in this work. So it means that we're trying to gather evidence for SDGs 3, 5, and 16. So how do they interconnect with each other? What is good health and well-being? How does that relate to gender? And how does that relate to particularly equality, inclusion, and justice? This is fundamental for societies and to keep and preserve peace. And whereas countries having a lot of conflicts, are these kind of factors lacking then? So some of the, I'll just say that this commission is to be launched formally in the end of this year, or possibly the beginning of next year, with a global launch. But we have some kind of draft key messages already now. And that means that the health equity and gender equality will have a unique and powerful ability to really try to create peaceful societies here. And that is an enormously important contribution here. And policy initiatives to improve health equity and gender equality is also, of course, driven by external actors, but they also have risks. And this must be acknowledged. And I'll just also say that before going on further, that I mean, we are examining now health and gender, but there will be also other factors, of course, important to create peaceful society. But we need to try to see out how can we, in the best of ways, unlock the potential of gender equality and health equity, which is required for really reaching these approaches and policy processes. And there's a lot to do. And the most exciting with using this or working with this commission, that is, I mean, you combine researchers from the peace and conflict area, from the health area, and from the gender area. And most commonly, these people haven't really worked together. So how can we actually move together in a better way to achieve better results in this kind of very difficult area? So the promise of health equity and gender equality to facilitate more peaceful societies, that requires the global community to really re-establish the human imperative for international cooperation, and building on unifying narrative that reminds us of our shared humanity and dignity and charts common agenda for the future. We are not there at this present time, definitely not given the situation during the pandemic, has been, for example, the very unequal distribution of vaccines. And now the ongoing conflicts, and not only the conflicts in Europe, but also in Mediterranean area and also in some African countries. So we have a lot to do here. Oh. So why is this then important? Well, it contributes to global policy priorities. We need to work in the Agenda 2030 for the sustainable development, as has been mentioned here also. And it also, sorry, now it's here. It of course will address the evidence gaps needed to inform policy and practice. We need to provide the evidence to the decision makers, to people that has the governments, the institutions, but also on the grassroots. This empirical evidence of how interventions to promote health equity and gender equality impact also this conflict dynamics. So this is important to trying to provide good science. Let's try to. So it brings together, as I just briefly mentioned, the typically separate disciplines and sectors that hasn't really been working together, that needs to do that. So there are gaps in practice and research that's driven in part by divisions between the health, gender, humanitarian, and peace sectors. For example, the peace research field has largely, and that's kind of unexpected though, but health. And many of my colleagues within the health sector and physicians, they have no idea about the peace research. So we like to put forward a new agenda for future policy action and research. And that means that trying to create new frameworks with strong messages that can be leveraged for dialogue and organizational change. This is not an easy task, but we have to start somewhere. And to help to improve health and gender equality interventions in conflict-affected settings, and ensure intervention to support a transition to a more peaceful society, also in the COVID, but also post-COVID context, of course. And the commissioners of this ongoing commission put out also a comment in the Lancet just recently, where we call on the global health community to urgently address the new health, humanitarian, security, and refugee crisis caused by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And they use this perilous moment to reinvigorate an agenda for global cooperation and global governance. And this is even further exacerbated by the lack of transportation of wheat, for example, from both Ukraine and Russia that has been stopped. And that will cause further suffering for already vulnerable people in particularly Africa, the East Africa now, which has big problems with drought and less of food, lacking food, and the poverty will increase. So we need to step up here. So what is then the road ahead for this commission now? To trying to transforming this research into some kind of action. So it's not just be a publication as such, because we're not interested in that. We're interested in that it should be some effects and implementation of this. So we are working hard as we speak during the summer to trying to finalize this report, because we have been working with this for over 4 years now. So along the fall and the end of the year, we'll have this global launch. But importantly, it's important then to engage the different key stakeholders here with policy briefs, with the meetings, and particularly also focusing on the next generation of the young people. And we have special commissioners here representing the next and young generation of research. That is incredibly important. And how do we then ensure that we implement recommendations? Well, that is maybe not our task primarily, but we need to be trying to facilitate this with working with different organizations, trying to do as much dissemination of the research as possible for also the local communities, but also for institutions and the government and to trying to further as well stimulate other researchers to continue this and to inspire and to monitor progress. So I come back to this, getting close to the final part, that, yeah, we have this Global Health and Peace Initiative now. And I can just say that together with the work for the Eastern Mediterranean office in Cairo, they are interested in trying to take part in sharing our research. And the different ministries, also some of the countries in East Mediterranean, are really interested to see how can we, with evidence, also move this agenda forward with health as a bridge for peace, or peace through health and gender. And we need to then have a strategy then of initiatives to actually address this conflict and support the peace building. And together with the WHO, we plan to do multilateral meetings and webinars on this. And it's also very nice and interesting because there are several other organizations that are interested in this work as well. And we hope that together with Dr. Tedros and with the different hubs across the world, we're trying to reach out to provide decision makers with more evidence so they can lend on and having a support to say that this is actually what has been shown, let's do that now. But we have to be humble as well, because there's so many organizations and people working on the ground that they say, we don't need any evidence for something, we know how the things are. Yeah, that's fine. But I think that for government and putting money into systems, they need to lean on something, and that's what we are trying to provide. So with these words, I am very, very humbled, and thank you so much also, Pelle and all co-workers, for allowing me to speak about this, with also, as you know, huge impact on food and food security. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. This was really a powerful connecting, like health, food, gender, peace. We are very, very good on schedule. And I would like to bring in all the panelists so that we actually can speak to each other, and the attendees, you can send in questions to generally the panel or a specific panelist, and I will bring it up as a moderator. Well, first of all, I would like Edouard to comment on what he heard and any impressions, please.
Well, I've learned a lot today, and for me, there's two key words. The first one is respect, which I think is a very, very important dimension of the whole issues in every direction. We need to respect each other more. And the second one is that we have to be very humble, because the issues are so big and complicated, need so much work and of everybody together to solve anything. There's so much to do, and it's mind-boggling. It's impossible not to be humble when you see what needs to be done. So thank you very much. I'm very, very impressed by all the participants, and learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Edouard. Anna, of course, you know all these sustainability issues from inside and out. When you hear about Peter's presentation of his work in general and the Site Lancet Commission in specific, what do you think is the big contributions, because I'm sure there are many, that can be brought from the FAO Indigenous Peoples units to Peter's work?
Thank you very much, Pelle. Indeed, gender is an important component for us. We work a lot with Indigenous women, and Indigenous women have specific knowledge. First, they have specific knowledge on the food system. As I was saying, they are the one who keeps the seeds in the community, so they have lots of knowledge on genetic diversity. And they have lots of knowledge on the wild edible gathering. So they are the one who can recognize the edibles and who gathers them and who teach the daughters to do the same. The same also for men. For example, men hunt with their boys. Sometimes also the girls come, but the gender is a very important topic of our work. And not only Indigenous women are knowledgeable, they also in some society keep the land. For example, in the Kashi community in India, these are matrilineal societies. So the land, the territory is inherited from women to daughters. And so that is why the collective rights on access to land is very important to respect, as Edouard said, because whenever there is an administration, external administration system coming into to regulate the customary tenure of land, it totally disrupts the governance system, and it breaks it. So then it actually fragilizes and weakens the. So I find this this aspect very interesting, and of course, health, as we said, and also this is what Mai-Lis also mentioned, is totally related to food, and at global level, as we saw with Ukraine, and that is not able to deliver wheat to African countries at the moment, but also at human level, the diet. And also at the species level, the nutrient component of the food. So thank you very much, Peter, for highlighting this.
Thank you, Anna. And there are so many impressions, and I'm sure we'll all need to look at these videos and recordings again over and over, and also go deeper into the actual books and reports that are already available. And most of the publications from FAO are totally available online and through PDF. But I actually, in the exhibitions today, got some questions whether there is possible to purchase the actual books from FAO. Do you have like a web shop or something for your books?
I think they are available on Amazon.
Okay.
Otherwise, the person can write to us and we can see how we can organize.
That's very good, because we find in the exhibition, the official inauguration was today, but actually it opened already before we went to Umeå. It's a continuous question, where can I buy this? How can I bring this knowledge at home? How can I keep it on my coffee table or on my bedside? Because there is so much in a book where you want to go back and check, and you want to go back to something that you read a few days ago or a week ago, and there the printed book is unbeatable when it comes to expand the understanding. And the Indigenous people's food systems, we've been talking a lot about this book the past year, and we keep talking about it because of its importance. I feel that because it contains descriptions and very detailed descriptions of the Indigenous people's food systems in different parts of the world, it also teaches us something about the similarities. The similarities between the Indigenous people's food systems amaze me, because I think regardless of these groups of people never had contact really, they never met, they must be amazed themselves that these guys in the Americas are doing the same thing as people in the Arctic, Africa, or Asia. Do you have any reactions like that from the participants in the project?
No, but that's a very good point. Is indeed the book really highlights the unique and common characteristics of sustainability of indigenous people food systems. And the reflection you have, I also had it myself when I started working with indigenous peoples, how their food system are similar and how the struggle are similar. And this is something that we experience working with them, is that it's very shared key messages.
Yeah.
So yes.
And the struggles, I'm not indigenous myself. We have a lot of friends, of course, in Scandinavia that are involved in reindeer herding, or their families are involved. But through the pastoral work and the character of reindeer herding, for instance, nations' borders are not there to the herd. But these national borders affect these indigenous peoples in many, many ways. You would think Sweden and Norway are so developed countries that this would work smoothly. Well, it used to, but during the pandemic, it was proven that looking after the herd was really tricky. If you were Norwegian by citizen and had to look after your work in Sweden and then travel back across a near enough close border. And I can only imagine the troubles for nomads or pastoral herders in conflict areas.
Mm-hmm. No, totally. Totally. In the case of the Sami people, we've been working with them also, and that is true that with the Inari Sami in Finland and the arrival of the Finnish really changed their food system. From fully nomadic people, they became semi-nomadic reindeer herders. So yes, at this level, there are issues. We also worked with the Kelta Mashek in Mali, who are also nomadic people and herders of cows and any other type of cattle. And they have issues in the region with settlement and with increasing cultivation and area of cultivation that also drains the water. So there are lots of conflict also arising with the water, especially this year that is very dropped already in this part of Africa, in the Sahel.
Yeah. No, these challenges, of course, require understanding from policymakers and governments. So there's much work to do. I'm very, very happy that we brought everyone together here, and through the video meet, being able to share the knowledge, and hopefully we can also catalyze the process of getting to know each other and each other's work. I would like to ask Peter, what is your general feeling or impression from these different presentations, everything from Professor Mai-Lis and Hellenius, whom you know, but also through Pacific Islands Food Revolution, who actually prove very much your points on health issues. And so, Peter, what's your impression?
I love this. I think bringing different expertise together in this way and organizations is absolutely fantastic and so important, so incredibly pivotal to do this and not just sitting in our own silo, so to speak, to work, because that's not enough. I remember in a meeting we had also the Minister of Health from Fiji. So I'm very well aware also of the Pacific Islands and the different problems that we have across the world. There's also been some other Lancet commissions focusing on health, climate, and one was published a couple of years ago, combining malnutrition, overnutrition, and climate. And that's what they called a syndemic approach that we need to have. Just, I think, about 2 years back, there was an Eat Lancet commission published as well. The government from Norway, actually, where they said that, well, if we have a planetary health diet, you will save 11 million people a year. But we need not only to focus on a good diet for the high-income countries, but we need to really focus also on what is a good diet and a proper diet and enough diet for poorer countries.
Yeah.
So my takeaway here is that we will need to continue and strengthen and increase our syndemic work together to see how you optimize situations with, peace, conflict, for example, that if you have malnutrition and lack of food, that is causing social unrest and may lead into conflicts. So there are many angles to this. So we need all the expertise together here to provide good science, good information, good policies, and really to reach out to governments and having also put on the table accountability. Who is going to hold accountable for what we are doing? And we need to step up in order to try to ensure that. So let's try to work together even more.
Thank you, Peter. I think there is a separate webinar called Accountability. It will be a long one. We have an attendee question from Guillermo Gonzalez, specifically asking Anna. Can you see it in the chat, Anna?
No, thank you very much, and thank you, Guillermo, for your question. I think I will start from what Edouard said, respect and humility. So this is where we start from. And when we work with indigenous peoples and native communities, also Afro-descendant, it's really important to first listen and then co-create knowledge and then co-create intercultural policy. So how do we do this? At international level, there are different initiatives that move into this direction. At FAO, we have the Global Hub of Indigenous Peoples Food Systems that aim to influence policy at international level. But there are other UN organizations. For example, the UNFCCC, the one of Convention of Climate Change. You know, I'm sure the report of IPCC is also including a lot of traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples and local communities. So these are these steps that are very important. There is also IPBES. I don't know if you know this international consortium. It's the similar of IPCC, but for biodiversity conservation. And they start to really also include indigenous people's knowledge and local community knowledge. So this is really step by step, and it needs to be at different entry levels. So IPCC, BBS, Global Hub is at evidence-based level. Now, based on that, we need to work with policymakers. We need to work all together and co-create knowledge. Yes. I hope I answer your questions.
Thank you. I think Guillermo is happy, and we can also pick up these topics in the future. I'm very, very glad that we could have this webinar today, not only to celebrate the Sustainable Gastronomy Day appointed by the United Nations, but also to bring the aspect sustainable gastronomy, not only to health issues, but also to gender equality issues, minority indigenous peoples issues, which are all totally knitted together with food policies and governance, but also the general peace aspect. Edouard introduced the webinar speaking about hope. And I must say that even though we were talking today about many hardships and a lot of trouble, unhealth, unrest, and unpeace, there is still much hope to look forward to from the aspect of collaboration, international collaboration. And if there is anything that I personally would believe that the international community can do, which is more difficult in countries, any country, also in fully so-called democratic countries, is that the indigenous peoples are outnumbered in many societies. So if the international community can help to look after their interests, I think much is gained to meet and address the pressing issues about how to preserve and also, of course, develop the indigenous communities. How can you get a vote if you're 10,000 people on a land area that maybe is the size of a Central European country? And then the rest of the community in the same land is maybe 10 or 100 times more than you. There is no way that you can even get a mayor in your hometown because you're outnumbered with your interests. So that's something that I personally think that the international community really, really can help. I have a few words written down by the organizers of this webinar, and I will cut it short. And it's of course a thank you note for panelists, attendees, and also the Alfred Nobel House. We know that on the shoulders of pioneers like Alfred Nobel himself, of course, the prize winners in different scientific fields, also within the field of peace or economics. There are some of the greatest scientists and health promoters here today in this webinar. The level of Professor Mai-Lis Hellenius at Karolinska Institutet, Professor Peter Friberg, Edouard Cointreau for all your initiatives and hard work, Anne, the FAO Indigenous Peoples Units, the Pacific Island Food Revolution, and all the people supporting it. All these contributors, all these authors, all these people that engage in this represent a power that is greater than, probably much greater than we know now today. Maybe in 10 years we can reflect upon how large an impact this has been. There are some key facts that may be applied for tomorrow, but as you've all been saying, time is short and knowledge is lost. It's difficult to document if a language is lost because the language describes the foods and the food systems. And I think that FAO Indigenous Peoples Units has described this particularly well. I hope that this also can bring something into policy making about indigenous languages. This webinar has been organized by myself. I'm the CEO of Hallbars Research Institute. We are like a guest, but becoming now a permanent guest here at the Alfred Nobel House Museum. It is shared by, the chairman is the governor of Örebro County, Mrs. Maria Larsson. She's also former minister of health and social care in Sweden, so she knows very well our issues. And then we have a human resources director within the Hallbars called Lynn Hed. She's a psychologist. I'd like to thank Professor Mai-Lis Hellenius also for bringing us together with Peter Friberg and also with the help from Ole Petter Ottersen, the dean at Karolinska Institutet. A sincere thank you to Edouard Cointreau, because somehow, I don't know exactly how you do it, but you always manage to provide the best platforms for communication and international collaboration on food issues, bringing us to peace, bringing us to sustainability, and also bringing us to a lot of joy. You could see that in the video from Umeå. And well, that was my final words. Maybe Edouard wants to say something to the panel and the attendees.
All I'll say is thank you and have a nice weekend. I think it's time to wrap it up. It's been very long and very good. So thank you very much. let's go and
Thank you.
enjoy now the weekend. Very beautiful weather.
Thank you. So it is here.
Thank
Take good care, everyone.